Well, hi everybody. It's Joe Chaffee and Joe Rayo, back from a whole day off on the
Yeah.
Joe and Joe Weather Show, the 24th of August. You know, Christmas Eve is 3 months from today.
Excuse me, Joe.
What?
24th of August?
I'm sorry, 24th of September.
Yes. Okay.
It shows you where my head is at.
Yeah.
Let me repeat that. It's the 24th of September. And do you realize, Joe, that it's 3 months from today?
3 months from today, Christmas Eve.
Yes, and by the way, I did see a story today on CNBC about it because everybody's shopping online, obviously, with everything that's going on. But there's such a uh, there's so much demand with regards to shipping and the supply chain and everything else that they're advising and to if you're doing your shopping, Christmas shopping online, to get it started early. So if you have a gift to get me, just go ahead and do it now and get it over with.
It's going to be here before you know it.
hmm
I
You
mean,
ign- you ignored the part about the gift. I get it.
yeah.
So let's start off with some good news. Okay, the chairman does not have COVID. Our Scott Briller, still not feeling well at all, but he did test negative for it, so he must have picked up some other bug, maybe an early adventure of the flu, with nausea, cough, and back with the temperature again, I believe. So we wish him well. Just keep resting up. Usually with these things, Joe, if it's like in my experience, whenever I've gotten some kind of a bug or a virus, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but usually takes you about 5 days to 5 to 7 days to just kind of run through the bulk of it, and then it finally just breaks and then it goes away.
Don't you hate it when you have, let's say, a fever, and what you do is you get, let's say, in flannel, and go under the covers and pile on as many. You try
You
and
can't
basically
get
sweat
warm
out.
enough. You're freezing. You're burning with fever and you're freezing.
Right. Right.
Oh,
And
yeah,
so
not fun. So we wish him well. Hopefully, he'll be on the path of recovery shortly. I see Greg Carriga made it up on the live stream tonight. Also saw John Trabacchino earlier, who I haven't seen in a long time, and I know John's been dealing with a number of rather serious issues, and we wish him all the best. And glad to see him that he was on board. I don't know if he still is. And I saw him earlier on the chat before the show started. So looking ahead, boy, it really seems strange. There's nothing in the tropics. Not a thing.
yeah, and it looks like, as we've been saying, because this huge subtropical high pressure system over the Atlantic is going to kind of flex its muscles over the next week or so, that's pretty, I think, going to pretty much preclude any kind of significant tropical disturbance to develop, which is kind of good because it was going at a whirlwind pace. You knew it had to wind down or break down eventually. Not to say that it won't start up again maybe later this month, but no, actually early
Well, early
next month,
October,
early
which I
October.
think it will. I think you're going to see it rev up again. There's nothing that's really changed. The La Nina is out there. It's strengthening. So if it plays according to plan, then yeah, I think we'll probably see this rev up again as we get into the first couple of weeks of October. And there's all sorts of other changes going on in the upper atmosphere that we're going to have to contend with between now and then. So um, in the meantime, we can kind of sit back and not really worry too much. In fact, we'll just get the tropics out of the way right off the bat. How shall we do that? By showing you a tropical satellite. And I've been using the enhanced satellite lately, Joe, because I think it really gives you a better feel for just exactly what you're dealing with down there. And there's a weak wave that's out off the coast southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, producing a few scattered showers and storms. There's another stronger wave that's coming off, but upper air conditions really not all that conducive. If you look closely, a lot of these clouds are blowing from west to east, and high level clouds, so that tells you there's some shear going on. One area I think you might want to look at down the road might be the Western Caribbean. Might be the place where we'll see something try. perhaps in about a week to 10 days. We'll see. But other than that, you got a frontal boundary in the middle of the Atlantic there running down to the Leeward Islands. So for now, uh, as I said, we can take a snooze and focus on what's going on here. And we made upper 70s and lower 80 upper 70s today, but a lot of high clouds got on the scene, and that, of course, from the remnants of Beta, which you could see here from the Canadian satellite view.
Beta passing off to our south. Actually, the what you would call the center of Beta will be passing, believe it or not, due south of here, probably on Saturday morning. Although there's a lot of overrunning moisture associated with that remnant feature that, as you mentioned, got in here today, Joe. I expect that we'll see the clouds move out for a while tonight, and then they'll move back in, high and mid-level clouds tomorrow. It doesn't look like we're going to be touched by any precipitation until maybe late on Saturday. There may be a few spot showers here and there, but the main dose of precipitation probably holding off until either Sunday night or early next week to get us. It's been a long time. I think we've gone like 2 weeks without any significant precipitation around here.
And there's a lot, and there's a lot of areas in New England and down to us that are now unusually dry. So we really could use a shift over to the rain, a rainier pattern. That'll perhaps rear its head early next week when we've got a couple of cold fronts going through. Just want to point out, by the way, folks, if you look up at Nova Scotia and Newfoundland today, they had a really nice day. Weather conditions improved quite smartly as Teddy has now been absorbed. You can see it here. There's a storm that's midway between Labrador and Greenland, and Teddy just basically got absorbed by that low and frontal system that extends out into the Atlantic Ocean. So we have said goodbye. Another storm has played out and made its way into the North Atlantic graveyard. And in the meantime, we do see, Joe, an active west. There's moisture coming across the northern Pacific that is destined for the Pacific Northwest. So we're seeing, the satellite looks a little cleaner now with regards to the smoke from the wildfires in the Southwest. Doesn't seem nearly as pronounced as what we had just a short time ago.
I'm checking here, Joe, on while you're talking. I'm looking at the Chronicle Herald, which is supposedly the newspaper in Nova Scotia. And I guess Teddy really wasn't really all that big a deal, because you would expect that if it was, we'd be hearing about the aftermath of the storm, but they really don't have anything about Teddy. It says candidate says fact she's a mom used as campaign tactic against her. Nova Scotia woman back in court to try and stop husband's medically assisted death. Nobody is invincible. In TV address, Trudeau urges Canadians to do their part to fight COVID-19 second wave. But I don't see anything, at least in the headlines here, regarding Teddy. So I guess Teddy came and went yesterday.
Yeah, when I was looking at some of the obs during about the time that Teddy was approaching the coast there, one of the fortunate things was that the storm slowed down and actually weakened. The pressure filled up about, I don't know, 24 millibars maybe. And the winds, yeah, there were some gusts to 40, 50, and maybe even some gusts up to 60 or better right along the immediate coast. And in some of the areas where there's elevation, you get the wind that funnels through. But I'm guessing that for the hardy folks in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, this was nothing. This didn't really stand out in terms of being something destructive. I think Dorian was far worse when it went up there last year. So, which is what we hope for when these things are around. You hope that they fall apart a bit when they approach land, and that lessens the impact. And we certainly have seen it. Certainly have seen it in the case of Teddy going into Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, unless someone tells us otherwise. In the meantime, on the U.S. Satellite view, a lot of this moisture that's left back from Beta is getting all stretched out across the Gulf states. You still got clouds all the way back into East Texas, Joe. And I think we're going to probably see these high clouds around again tomorrow. Uh, I'm hoping that there's probably a little bit of drying, that we get into some strands of sunshine in there. But that deck of clouds to the south is still going to be prominent until the whole thing just moves off, as you said, sometime early Saturday morning.
Yeah, it looks like we'll have to be dealing with that. But again, it doesn't look like we're going to be looking at any kind of major precipitation outbreak for a while still. But we could use some of that moisture because, again, I think today was like the 14th day of dry weather, at least in the immediate tri-state area. And we could certainly begin, thinking that we could use a little bit of rainfall. But it doesn't look like it's going to be coming our way until maybe again more like Sunday night and Monday. Although there might be a drop or two here on Saturday, maybe.
In the meantime, on the radar, this morning when I looked at the radar, the northern fringe of the rain was, you could probably draw a line from east to west from, oh, I just say just north of Richmond and perhaps uh, just south of Charlottesville. And if anything, that line's kind of sunk maybe a little bit further south in the western part of Virginia. You've got rain in North Carolina, some heavier rain going on, is patches of heavier rain in the western half of the state, back through eastern Tennessee, northern Alabama, around parts of Georgia, South Carolina. But we're not seeing anything really, nothing's really pushing north. This whole thing is sliding to the east. There are some echoes off the Delmarva Peninsula, but those are moving out. In the meantime, a couple of showers came off Lake Ontario in upstate New York, and a couple of showers up there in northern New England that developed during this afternoon, but those are dying out. Other than that, the radar is pretty quiet there. A little bit of activity this evening moving across central Wisconsin and in Washington State and in Northwest Oregon, getting some showers coming in off the Pacific. And that's where WPC, the weather prediction folks, on their 7-day rainfall forecast map, still indicating they've had rain. If we go back to a few days ago when they were showing several to many inches, now that area of several to many inches has shrunk down to Washington State, but still expecting another couple of inches from Oregon, western Oregon, up the coast to western Washington, with heavier rains going up into Canada. And Joe, here in the east, if the hope is for some rain, this I think is for the first part of next week. WPC is showing anywhere from a half an inch to an inch and a half from Virginia north to Maine. So that won't hurt the dry conditions, certainly. And several inches or more of rain across the Carolinas. Some of that's due to what's going through there tonight and for tomorrow, and then additional rains that'll probably come through the first part of next week. Also, some heavier precip showing up in parts of South Florida as well, and about a half an inch to an inch back through the middle Mississippi Valley. The Southwest uh, is um, is pretty dry. So yeah, I think, like you said, I think we're going to look ahead to some rain here come Monday and Tuesday with a weather front. That's a couple of weather fronts that are going to go by. And Joe, I'm looking at this pattern for next week. If it's goes according to plan, you see that was Teddy on the upper air. Of course, that's gone now. And the little trough, the little shortwave trough there represents what's left of Beta. That goes out to our south. And you got all this energy in the Pacific that's coming into the Pacific Northwest, and nice little upper low that's in Western Canada. This is all going to start translating eastward. So it looks like we're going to get into what looks like a fairly deep trough into the eastern part of the United States that sets up starting around the middle part of next week, and then it hangs around in one form or another right through the 4th or 5th of October. And then there's more energy that tries to come down from the north. So we're going to get cool around here later next week into next weekend if this is correct.
Yes, no question about it. No question about it. And it's a fast progressive flow. And that flow, again, introducing every few days, reinforcing shots of cool air. So, that having been said, at least for the moment, Joe, if that continues, if there were any kind of tropical system out there of significance in the Atlantic, I don't think we really would have to be too concerned with it because any kind of system that might come within striking distance of the eastern United States probably would get swept out by one of these shots or series of cool air masses dropping on down from Canada.
Yeah, and unless the trough is sharper and further left, that would be the one thing you'd have to watch for. But if it stays on the broad side, yeah, I think anything that were to form out there would probably just go up and out. I brought up the temperature anomalies. We don't often do this. Probably should do it more often, but you kind of get a feel for what's been happening here. Now, I went back to Monday, where pretty much everybody east of the Mississippi was below normal in terms of temperatures, and that held on through through Tuesday. Now it's still below normal across the southern states, but that's of course because of the clouds and the rain. But we went a little bit above normal on Wednesday, and we're going to stay above normal here uh, through Sunday into Monday. You see it here on the 84-hour GFS temperature anomaly, but you start to see an increasing area of below normal temperatures from the plains and Rockies and into the western lakes on Monday. And this is your weather front that sets up. The real push, Joe, looks like it comes through sometime on Tuesday. And then after Tuesday, everybody east of the Rockies pretty much is below normal right through. Now I'm up to Monday, October 5th here. And East of the Rockies, it's all below normal. It's still below normal through Tuesday the 6th, and then it starts to come up again. I guess at that point the trough starts to relax a little bit, but we do have this pretty impressive push of cool air that's coming. It looks like there's some minus 10 degree or more anomalies with this as it moves east.
Yeah, and in fact, I saw an article today in the online edition of the Washington Post that was ballyhooing the fact that much colder temperatures were headed into the central and eastern states for next week. So they're playing up the fact that here comes the cool air. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be. You look at something like that and you say, "Oh my goodness, it's going to get cold or freezing." I think not necessarily. I mean, if we're talking about days in the 60s to around 70, nights in the 40s, pretty much the kind of weather that I think a lot of us wish we could have all year round, instead of having to deal in the winter with, exceedingly cold or frigid temperatures, or in the summer, as we did a good number of times with very oppressive conditions.
Yeah.
As I said, this summer we were coming off of really was not necessarily all that hot, but my goodness, it's been one of those top 10 humid summers that made it all the more oppressive to be outside, especially I think during the month of July.
The GFS does bring a nice big high coming down from Canada, and it does bring at least aloft anyway some pretty chilly air. I'm just taking a look to see if it translates, how it translates down to the surface. I'm trying to find the 32-degree line here. Saturday morning, the freezing line is pretty far north and west. And I'm looking at Sunday morning, it's still pretty far north and west. So it looks like the, the cold air, this colder air, you finally start to see the 40-degree isotherm get close come Monday morning of the week of the 5th. So it's more reflection aloft of what's of that cold air. Definitely colder air aloft, but not overly cold at the surface. And you can see it here. All that blue shading here just represents the that deep upper trough that is swinging into the eastern part of the United States. I'm trying to see if we got. Yeah, okay, good. So we do have it on the 18Z. I just wanted to kind of follow up on to see what the 18Z did with this in terms of the upper air in the east. But yeah, you're right about what you said earlier. I mean, the trough there is very broad. So, if we do get any kind of tropical system, it would be sent out to sea in a hurry. You got a big upper high that is back over Oregon. So, whatever flow of moisture coming in from the Pacific, that's going to get cut off if that verifies. And that trough in the east on the new run just kind of sits there. We're into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, still troughing in the east. Yeah, I mean, right through the long range period, Joe, we got a ridge in the west and a trough in the east. So, um, at the very least, I would think we'd be able to get some rain out of this.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to be a tremendous amount. Again, partially because it's such a broad trough, and also because, as I noted, things are moving very quickly. It's very, progressive pattern, but still anything will help. I mean, we, as I said, have had, I think out of the last 24 days or 25 days, there've only been 4 days with measurable precipitation in the immediate tri-state area. And we are in kind of a mini drought now. We could use some kind of moisture, and maybe we'll get something early next week. We're going to have, again, as you mentioned, not just one, but two weather fronts quickly moving through the area. And each one will perhaps, or working with each other, they may produce a rather significant zone of precipitation, which we could use.
Yeah, the first one kind of peters out a little bit because of the fact that it's waiting for that upper air to sort of swing around. The area that's back to the west represents the second and probably and will be the more important weather front. And you do start to see some showers by Monday morning in New England and down into the Mid-Atlantic states. And then we just wait till Tuesday. And I don't know, Joe. The GFS actually with this front for Tuesday, I kind of goes, it goes a bit robust with regards to some showers and thunderstorms. I'm just going to check this upper air here just to see what we're looking at as the trough swings eastward. And I mean, at least on Tuesday, this is a nice looking trough that's getting ready to swing east. So I wonder whether we might get maybe some rumbles of thunder with that front when it goes by.
Well, I think the European, for whatever reason, the European kept this dry right until later Tuesday and into Wednesday. Now, the other models seem to be suggesting that with this progressive nature of the troughs and the weather systems, that we would be moving into an improving weather pattern by Wednesday. But the European seems to be a bit slower, and they don't bring in any of this significant rainfall until later
Right,
Wednesday,
because
later
the
into
because the
Wednesday.
Euro, the European's doing two things. It digs the bottom of that trough and actually has a cutoff in central Mississippi, and the trough axis on Wednesday morning is still way to the west. I mean, we have an upper high off the East Coast with the south southwest flow here, and yeah, the front's probably delayed by an extra day, and then it swings that southern energy up into West Virginia, and you still have the trough still pretty far to the west come Thursday and Friday. It's at the end of the week that you
Right.
finally get the whole thing to swing around. And then the other thing I just noticed is on the European as well. There's another arm that's up north of Lake Winnipeg that I guess would just kind of drop in and reinforce this. So if the European is correct, it would certainly suggest that uh, yeah, the chillier air will come. It just may get delayed by a day or two. I just wanted to kind of see what's going on in the Atlantic side, and there's a big upper high that builds in the middle of the Atlantic. You didn't see it. It's kind of funny because all summer long we had this sort of very narrow east-west high and below normal pressures throughout much of the tropics. And I'm just looking at this upper air, which finally has a big Azores Bermuda high, and here we are in the month of October. The one thing I would note that with the high that far north, the upper high and probably the surface high as well, it's probably going to create conditions as we get into October of lower than normal pressures in the tropics again. So we've saw a number of systems come out where we've had that condition, and you wonder if there's going to be another high building out in the Atlantic like this. But the European is just insistent on waiting. Uh, that big ridge in the Atlantic kind of holds things in check there with that trough coming into the east.
Right. And of course, as not a few people have mentioned in recent days, let us not forget that Sandy was a storm that hit in the waning days of October. So who's to say that we may have another storm like that? I certainly hope that's not the case, but we may. I think we are. I think you're right. I think we're going to see everything kind of reignite again when we get into October and we break out of this rather tranquil pattern that we're into right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I got the European 240 hour up there on the upper air, and that's a chilly upper air. And in fact, the pressures across the Arctic region are very high. So the whole flow is displaced to the south. So this is a fairly cold look here. Upper low is in the eastern Aleutians. You got a trough that's just east of 160. So I imagine the teleconnections at this point would show probably a strong Pacific North America pattern, a strong positive, and a let's call it a neutral NAO going into the early part of October, and definitely a cooler look when you got something like this because your flow is basically coming down right out of northern Canada into the southeast. How much of that translates to the surface remains to be seen, but as the GFS, as we showed you, the temperatures on the GFS were cool, but what they weren't really super cool or what I would call cold. I would think it would be as chilly as the last air mass that we just had, if I had to bet.
Now, 5th of January, Joe, do you think they would be issuing any kind of a stratospheric warming alert?
It's a little early for that. Although
Yeah.
all the snow lovers, they're all talking about Siberian snow cover and the stratospheric warming and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just it's not even October yet. But just for those folks who really need to see a snowfall map, okay, I will bring up the GFS, and since the new one is only out for some reason only through 10 days, and we know how accurate the model is out through 16.
Yes.
Let's I'll just run through a quick loop here of expected snowfall, and of course, obviously, most of it is up in northern Canada. Oh, you still start to see some snow show up in parts of Labrador and kind of inching its way southward in the 10-day forecast period. And somebody's going to look at those last two frames and see the little snow that pops up in northern Lake Huron. But now it's a little bit too early. And just for laughs, and this, by the way, takes us to Saturday, October 10th. And just for laughs, I might as well bring up Asia, and we'll take a look and see what it does there. And you are going to start to see, of course, this is the normal. This is the time where you would start to see some snow cover growth up in northwestern Asia. And if you follow the GFS along, it cooperates during the 10-day period during October, from October 1st to October 10th, showing some ample snow in at least in eastern Siberia. You want to kind of see it more in western Siberia, and there's nothing there yet. But again, it's way too early. And again, I'm doing this just to make the snow lovers happy. Okay, I'm not. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing that you can derive from any of this. Even when you have all the information, it's very difficult to derive anything conclusive because we've seen what's happened the last 2 years with what was supposedly a bullish Siberian snow cover signal, and it didn't work. Okay, and it didn't work last year. It didn't work the year. I don't think it's worked. That's a funny thing, Joe. I really believe this. Everybody's always searching for silver bullets in meteorology, and you find something that works as soon that seems to work. That seems to statistically work. We're back up full screen so they can see you yawn.
Yes.
Sorry. Um,
Sorry, Joe.
that's all right. No, I get it. It's a long day. I
It
get
has been a
tired
long
too.
day.
No, but what I was saying is everybody tries to find the silver bullet to give you an edge in a forecast, and then what happens? Everybody jumps on it, and as soon as everybody is looking at the same thing, guess what? It stops working. And as that indicator became wildly popular among the snow aficionados, it ceased to work. So we'll look at it and we'll just kind of sit back and
It's
then
kind of like it's kind of like when you have a very short number of a very small number of things, and you say to yourself, "Look, I can derive something from this." It's a very small number, though. I mean, you
yeah,
can't. I mean, you would prefer to have a broad area or a large number of different values to back you up. If you're only basing it on 3 or 4 things, and the same holds true with the snow cover. Now, you're absolutely right. There was a time when it was really a hot, like, wow, we finally found the silver bullet, as you mentioned. But uh, then they found out very quickly that, hey, it doesn't seem to work all the time. So
Jason Barry wants to see the polar vortex. So you know what? I'm going to go to the stratosphere since we really don't have a whole lot going on. Um, but let's see what I actually did look at this last night, and it's you're not going to get anything out of this in terms of significance, in my view. in my never to be humble opinion. But you are seeing it basically strengthen, which is what it's supposed to do. I'll run it back to the beginning, and you'll notice that there's you start with what is a weak low up in the Arctic region, and as we go through the next 16 days, it just gets stronger and stronger. You see that expanding area of blue. So the polar vortex is there. It's sitting uh, anchored up closer to Siberia than anything else, but it's doing what it's supposed to do this time of year, which is basically show up and get bigger. Because at this level of the atmosphere, especially as we go into the wintertime, that's usually all you have is just that big gigantic the low in the upper stratosphere that sits up in the polar regions, i.e. the polar vortex in the stratosphere. So we'll watch and we'll see what kind of clues we can get from it. I don't know that we'll be getting anything significant. And besides, at the end of the day, it's all about the short range anyway. So whatever's going on up there is not going to, they're not going to tell you that a month from now this is going to happen on a certain day or that's going to happen on a certain day. But I'm an open-minded sort of creature. I will,
It's
we'll look at it
it's
from
like
time to time.
it's like what I mentioned just a few moments ago with a small number. I have mentioned on more than one occasion that with this past winter at Central Park, we had 4.8 inches of snow total. And there were only three other cases where we had that happen, less than 5 inches of snow. In those three cases, though, the following winter, snowfall came back big time.
Right.
And in fact, on average, we had 11 times more snow the next winter as opposed to what we had in the winter where we had hardly anything. So you say to yourself, okay, well, that means that this upcoming winter, 11 times 4.8, that comes out to, my goodness, we're going to be in for like 50 some odd inches of snow this winter. Well, maybe it might happen. But again, we're basing this on only three other previous winter seasons. This could be the winter where it doesn't work. We'll
Past
see.
performance is no guarantee of future results. However, it's the only thing we have to look at. So we look at it. And as always, when you pick out a certain point, you know as well as I do that when you pick out what applies at one particular point might not even apply to another point, say 30 miles or 20 miles or
Right,
whatever,
right.
because of local effects. I mean, we've had winters where the numbers as represented by New York City don't represent the areas both to the east and to the west, and we've had a number of years from 2000 to 2020 where the snowfall amounts were double along coastal areas than they were in inland areas,
Correct.
and actually in only a few. And then you go back to the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and that 30-year span. It was reversed. So I I've always I look to see how when we get to that point in the calendar, which we're nowhere near yet, but everybody knows that I like I like to see patterns, and I like the patterns that tend to rhyme. They don't repeat exactly, but there's a certain commonness to it, and I want to see what goes on when we get into November, December. How are things setting
Oh,
up in the atmosphere? And that too might not hold when we get into January and February, but at least it
who's
gives you some clue to work with.
who's
I
going to be the first one to throw in the towel, the winter weather lover to throw in the towel when we get to Thanksgiving?
no, I know they should. No, they need to. I love it. I love it when they show up at December 1st, and you spend the entire month of December uh, reminding folks that the bulk of the winter snow that falls here is usually from mid-January to early March, in general.
Right.
I mean, certainly it's occurred outside of that, but in general, I would just go back to Joe what I said, been saying for the last couple of weeks. Well, actually, till until recently, when I gave up on the emerging volcano, the emerging new 2020 volcano, and I've gone to the idea that we're going to bring a tropical system up the East Coast sometime in late October or early November. That's going to become post-tropical while it's offshore and nearby, as cold air is coming down from Canada with a ginormous upper low, Okay, since the Hurricane Center can say ginormous, so can we. But some ginormous upper low is going to come crashing down with all this early season Arctic air, and we're going to have some sort of record-setting blizzard in the Northeast somewhere.
We talk about record-setting blizzard. Somebody, not a few people, have already asked me, "Hey, can we go back to 2005, the year when we had similar hurricane or tropical storm activity where we made it into the Greek alphabet the other time? What was the winter like after that particular year?" And they get all excited when they hear, oh, maybe there was something major. Well, that was the winter where basically it all boiled down to one single storm. There was one storm in the winter of 2006. It was in mid-February. Don't have the date in front of me here. That dumped in Central Park something like 27 inches of snow, beat out the old one-day record from 1947 of 25.6
Wait, wait,
inches.
wait, 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 wait. Hold on. Are you sure about that? Because 2000, that sounds almost like the 2016 storm in January that broke the record.
Well, no, in February of 2006, there was a major snowstorm, and that made up practically the entire winter's worth of snow, especially in February. February of 2006, Joe, was the most snowy February on record. That's something like 29 inches that month. But
Okay.
27 out of the 29 inches came from one single storm. And that really made up the whole winter that year at Central Park, was that one big storm. Take that one storm out of the equation, and that winter would have had maybe like 11 or 12 inches of snow.
Why
Um,
am I not? Why am I not remembering that? Look, I remember. I do remember that 0506 was the fourth year in a row for New York City that
third,
had.
third. There was 4 consecutive years where we had 40 plus inches of snow, and
Yeah,
2005,
0506 was
2006 was number three of the four. The
no,
third,
no, 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 no. 0506 was the fourth one in that. 0607 and 0708, there was very little
really?
snow in those winters. You had,
What?
wait, 0607 and 0708 were back to back snowless winters, Joe. So then if you jump to 0809, 0809 was a solid snow year.
I'm going to check with Johnny Gilbert right now.
You're right about there was
Johnny,
February 13th, a record 26.9 inches fell in New York City. It said more than 14 inches and 16 inches. This version of this article appeared on February 13th. I'm just doing a quick Google search here. Um, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. It was 26.9, the most snow of any location. Hartford also set theirs 21.9. Blah blah blah. Let me take a look. I'm going to see if I could pull up a map. Yeah, they got these pictures. Yeah, I guess there was. Now that particular year, as I recall, was another 60-inch plus year for me.
you're
So
no,
yes,
you're right. You're right about it was the fourth of the 4 consecutive 40 plus years. And I got to tell you something about that. I don't know if you remember this. We were hanging on 39.8 or 39.9 for much of the winter, and
yes, it
there was like a
ain't
very
yes.
there was like three flakes, and all of a sudden, and I said, well, what is that going to be a trace? And somehow or other, they managed to wangle 1/10 of an inch of snow to make it 40 inches, to make it 4 consecutive years of 40. And I said, wait a minute, hold on, hold on. I honestly believe that somebody in the weather service said, yeah, why don't we just give it to them, you know?
No, I guess I got a map here. Hang on a second. Yeah, hold on. Oops.
I mean, that makes up for all of the years when they used to just go out and measure
Go
the
measured
snow
on
on
the
car
car
tops.
tops, exactly. So you know what, we got some of it back on that day. So I'm not gonna complain. This is the October 72 hours preceding February 13th. And yeah, look at the purple are all areas that got greater than 20. Northeast New Jersey, New York City, northern Queens, Brooklyn, northern Nassau into Suffolk County, of course, my house, um, Putnam, uh, Westchester, Putnam into southwestern and central Connecticut. On up to blue is 14 to 20. So that actually extended from just outside Washington, D.C. through Baltimore and then northeast into southeastern Pennsylvania, right on up. And of course, lesser amounts as you got down into central and southern New Jersey. So I guess it probably changed over to rain. And of course, I'm noticing right by Alan's house is this big brown little circle that says trace to point two. I have to speak
You
to
know
him
what
and,
else?
and
You know
rub
what
it
else I
in.
remember about that snow, that particular snowstorm? It was a Sunday morning. That was the morning. That was the day Johnny Carson passed away. Johnny
Okay.
Carson passed away on the day of that big snowstorm in 2006.
The one
I don't know why I remember that, but that's you
the
know
the one signature about 2006 that stood out to me when I was just talking earlier about how things rhyme. Well, in 2006, there was if you look back at these storms in 2006, uh, most of them were rain changing to snow events.
right,
And there was one that I recall later in the month that I wound up getting a solid, I think about half a foot or maybe a little bit more. But it was one of these where you started with rain and then it went over to snow. And usually when that happens down at the coast, if it changes over, it usually does it at the very end, and it doesn't do very much. The cold air comes in too late, or if it comes in on time, the precip shuts off. It's a little rare. It's rare to see where it comes in and it lasts for a long enough time to put down an accumulation. But there were a number of systems that particular winter that were like that. And when you look at the temperatures from that winter, it was actually a warmer than normal winter by several degrees for the three
right.
months. December, it just happened, just like the winter of I guess if you want to parallel that, you can look at the winter of 1617, where it was a very warm winter from the standpoint of temperatures, but we did also get quite a bit of snow that winter in the coastal areas because it just happened that it got cold every time that there was a weather system around. If you remember, that was the year we broke all-time record highs in the month of early February when it got into the middle 70s, and we had the blizzard the next day
Right.
with lightning and thunder, and nobody believed that it was going to happen, and how is this going to be? And I remember we had, I think it was like 73 or 74 or 5 on the day before, and by the time we got to the next with the snow, the temperature the next morning had dropped down to 19. And I
Yeah.
remember driving my little Toyota on the hutch as the lightning and thunder were starting, and all of a sudden we had this massive heavy snow falling, and trying to keep my car on the road for the handful of miles that I had to drive from my mother's house over to the TV station. But you know what, Joe? We don't have to do that anymore. There's no
No, we
driving.
don't.
We don't
No.
we don't drive, so let it snow all at once in the wintertime. We don't have to get in the car and drive in it anymore.
Yeah.
All
It's
right,
hard to
so I
believe.
get
It's hard to believe. You think about all those times. Those are the things that really stressed me out about the job. The job was an interesting job. The job was a good job. I'm sure it's the same for you. It was something you always wanted to do. But during those times when we had the travel in, uh, snowstorms or heavy rain or, whatever, that's when it became a white knuckle moment, and that's when you were happy to get to where you were supposed to go. So
That's what I used to. That's what I used to wish that we could go back to the days back in the 70s where weather would get 20 seconds
yeah,
on a heavy news day.
on a
Yeah,
heavy.
I'm not. Yeah, that is one. And being someone who drove in virtually every major snowstorm in the 30 some odd years that I was, doing TV in the New York metro area in one place or another. Uh, I think I drove pretty much in every single one of them. That is one. Knock on wood. I don't know how I went through all of that without ever wrecking my car. I did with my Pathfinder in the blizzard of '96. My four-wheel drive decided to go out midway through the storm.
Right.
But I still managed to get home somehow when the last flake fell. I was there at the station when the first flake fell, and I didn't leave until the last flake fell 36 hours later. Yeah, I ain't doing that no more. Not doing it.
I think the maximum amount of snow on the road when I was driving to work for me was like 5 or 6 inches. Not fun, but
Oh,
you know,
I had far worse. I can remember. I remember in, I think it was 2013, 2014. I drove home. Um, it was that year and the year after. We had a whole, all the storms that we had in those 2 winters and involved temperatures that were less than 20, and in some cases less than 15. All those storms, those 2 winters, it was bitter cold.
right,
I mean, bitter cold. There was never a. You didn't have to struggle for the rain snow line in those 2 winters because it was so much Arctic air around that it didn't matter. But
right.
I drove home through some really whiteout conditions in that particular year. Thank God I had my truck. That was when I had my Dodge Dakota truck. But even that didn't handle too well when it came to uh, big snowfalls, even with the four-wheel drive. But yeah, that was difficult because when it's 15, nothing melts.
Right.
So you're driving in whiteout conditions where you can't even see out your windshield, and you just hope that you don't hit anything along the way.
In that 2006 snowstorm, I remember driving into work that day. Rob Eisenson was on duty that morning. He
Oh, he,
stayed
he, he
over.
came he came he said he decided to work that day.
No, they put him in a hotel. They
Oh, well,
put him in a
clearly.
hotel or whatever, and he came back. He came back the following morning, and I was supposed to relieve him. And I remember I was traveling on the Taconic Parkway, and the those of you who know or are familiar with the roadways, you can turn onto the Sawmill Parkway from the Taconic. And as I was doing this, all of a sudden, a huge gust of wind came. That snow that fell in that snowstorm in 2006 was kind of like a puffy, powdery, low density snow. All of a sudden, it was like being in a blizzard with that
Right.
one wind gust. And here I am trying to get onto the Sawmill from the Taconic, and I can't see in front of my face. And meanwhile, the sun was out, but all of a sudden, it was like what they call a ground blizzard. I said, this is wonderful. I said, I managed to avoid this massive snowstorm. I managed to get this far to work with sunshine, and now I'm going to get into an accident in a localized, whiteout, zero visibility situation on the Sawmill Parkway. Those days are done, my friends. We thought they'd
Yes.
never end.
Daniel Fitzsimmons. I got that. If It was on Wikipedia, that particular map. So I just put in the dates of the snowstorm, the date and the year of the snowstorm, and and New York City in a Google search, and it took me to the Wikipedia page, and that it has a. If you know the dates of the storms that you're looking at, wherever you are, if you put them in Google, you're going to find something that was, if it's a major storm, there's going to be something written about it, not just in New York City, but probably for other places as well. So it's a pretty good source to use because they'll should have satellites, they'll have radars on there sometimes, and also in this case they had the NOAA map, which is what you really want to look for in terms of accuracy.
Mark G, I took a class with Rob Eisenson in 2000.
Over in WestCon.
I guess so. Yeah.
Oh, very good, very good.
Rob sometimes believed that he was not only just the on-camera meteorologist when he was at News 12 Westchester, but sometimes he would lecture some of the reporters or the anchors because they were not performing the way they should or doing things the way he felt they should. I often said to myself, he thinks he's the assistant news director. At,
Yeah, I never really.
at
You know what? I had enough time. I had enough trouble doing what I had to do. I
What
learned.
really, tell you what really got Rob upset was that, let's say
By the way, he may be
he was,
watching this show, so
well, I'm not, this is not anything to put him down.
okay.
I'm just saying that this would get me annoyed sometimes,
Yeah,
where you work on a forecast. Let's say we're about to get a snowstorm, and you're saying like 2 to 4 inches. Meanwhile, the reporters are not calling the weather center or calling
I know.
the point two guy to get the information about the weather,
I
and they're
know.
simply going by what they heard on Channel 4 or what they heard the National Weather Service.
Or what they
So
heard on
they'll
News Radio 88.
right.
Yeah,
So
I know.
Rob would be sitting there getting ready to go on, and he says, and they throw to a reporter and say, well, as you probably know, we're going to get a foot or more of snow out of this. Meanwhile, Rob is going to say in a couple of minutes, we're only going to get about a half a foot or 4 to 6 inches. And like, as soon as the show is over, he would immediately go to the reporter who said that, or he immediately go to the producer, the executive producer, and say, he said, she's saying that one thing and I'm saying another, and this is very, very unprofessional. And
I will say this. I will say this. When I worked at Pix, okay, the newsroom, the reporters I worked with were great, and the producers there were terrific, and they always made sure to touch base because it was always, look, it's embarrassing if someone comes on, you have a reporter that's coming on ahead of you, and I'm not. The reporters have a tough time. They're out in the field. They're dealing with all sorts of nonsense. Aside from the fact that they're trying to organize this story and put together something for a newscast, and I totally respect that and I get it. So I always sort of made it a point to make sure that that what they were going to say was going to sort of match with what I'm going to say, because the worst thing, the most embarrassing thing is when someone comes on and says something totally different from what you're going to say, and you're spending your time basically correcting them, and you don't want to do that,
right.
because then it kind of makes them look bad. There were a couple of moments in my long career where that sort of thing happened, but I got to say, when I worked at Pix, it was great because everybody, they pretty much checked with me before they said anything. If they were going on live, they would check with me with 15 minutes before, 30 minutes before, just to be consistent, to make sure what they were saying made sense with what I was going to say. And I don't recall a single instance.
Well,
Um,
that's why, Joe, when we were working together at FiOS One, and John Houseman, who was at Pix when you were there at
yeah,
Pix, a
yeah.
big impending storm, the phone would ring in the weather corner or whatever. I pick it up, hello, and it was John. And John House would say, "Hi, Joe. Is the other Joe there right now?" Because he didn't want to hear what I was going to tell
No, and
him.
I'll tell you
He,
why.
he
I'll tell you,
wanted
but
he wanted
no,
your opinion.
and I'll tell you why. I love John Houseman. He's the best. I have to text him in a little while. I've been meaning to call him and text him, but there's a text I got to send to him. This way he'll know it would be me. But what happened was, so John had and I had a really great working relationship, and he was the reason why I wound up going from News 12 to Pix, because he lived in Massapequa and he used to see me on the air, and there was an opening for a weekend, and one thing led to another, and next thing I knew, I was working at Pix. Well, there were a number of instances over that course of the 13 years I was there where I would kind of call him during the week and let him know and just say, John, I think this may be going on. Looks like there might be a big snow for Long Island, et cetera, et cetera. And there were times where, in that stretch where Long Island got hit very hard with snowfall, but if you lived in New York City, you really didn't see any very much. Well, I called him about, I don't know, 5 days, 4 or 5 days before Hurricane Sandy, and told him that this was going to be huge. Okay. So I gave him a big heads up. So that's where it stems from. It was just years of conversations that he and I had prior to other snow events where I was able to give him the heads up on what was going to happen. And
Right.
those were great times for me. I mean, those
And
and
that was the, I always considered at News 12 Westchester, if I saw something really bad like Sandy or like an impending big snowstorm, I would always call my news director, Janine Rose, at home. Sometimes I'd call her, like Renata would say, says, why are you calling her? It's almost midnight. And I said, she's the news director. She has to know. She has to, this is something major, and I feel I have to tell her. And that's why I think she gravitated to me more than now. The Jason Schaefer's on the chat board,
yeah,
and
the
he said it
Jason
could be worse.
produced for me from time to time when I worked at Pix.
He said it could be worse. They could ask you, Joe Rayo, to do the live shoot. Jason, at News 12, it was always me doing the live shoot outside. Bryson Van Eck, the morning guy, was on in the studio. They always said, all right, Rayo, get out. And And I was out there through all the snowstorms, through the 30-degree below wind chills, everything. He said, well, let's go and see what Joe Rayo is doing out there. And there I am going,
I'm
well,
freezing. Yeah.
well, one of the great stories also, which was told at an AMS conference, I think it was in Williamsburg, Virginia, about 20 years ago. Harvey Leonard, who is a legend now in Boston.
Yes.
For the longest time, it was Don Kent, but Don went on to the great beyond in the late 90s, and Harvey Leonard pretty much took up the baton, and he has become a legend now, television weathercaster in Boston. He tells the story about how they he wanted to stay inside at the 11 o'clock hour to look at the latest FOOS information for a big impending snowstorm that had been promoted for days and days and days. And he kept telling the executive producer, I need to be in here. You want to send me outside? I'm not going to be able to get all the new data. And the executive producer says, no, you're going out because I want to see you freeze your face. Instead of having access to the, but as it turned out that night, for whatever reason, the FOOS was a few minutes early. And Harvey looks at it. He sees like 00000 for Boston.
Yeah.
The big storm now looks like it's going to the south. They, meanwhile, have had the first 10 minutes of the news with the big storm is coming, and they always show you the
Well, you know that big storm we were talking about? Well, that ain't happening.
That's exactly
that
right.
Ain't happening.
You throw it to Harvey.
Back to you.
Well, I just got to look at the very latest information. If it's right, this storm is going to our south.
Not a flake, not an ice pellet, nothing.
I mean, and this comes after the standard big. How many of you have ever watched in advance of a big snowstorm, and they have one of the reporters standing in front of a gigantic mound of salt at the local sanitation or DOT thing? It's always the same thing, you know. Well, let's see how the DOT is preparing for this. Let's go now to Congolia Clapsaddle in what do you think about this?
Congolia Clapsaddle? Where did you get that from?
As you can see, here's the big, that all of this salt, 25,000 tons, and it's going to get ready to, and it's with every single snowstorm, Joe. It's the same.
It's all the same formula
crap.
crap. It really is. It's all the same formulated crap, and there's nothing new.
And guess what? We have none of that this time. We don't deal with that anymore.
We're going into our second winter without having to deal with it, and it's wonderful. You know, you don't have that extra headache and the stress, and you know, it's great. We got our own world here with our wonderful audience.
2 o'clock in the morning.
What's that?
2 o'clock in the morning phone call. You pick it up and it's the assignment editor. So and so is sick. You got to come in. You know, or they want you.
The number you have reached. No, Joe. It's the number you have reached. 555-1212 is not in service.
I still remember doing the blizzard of '78, watching Channel 2. You see the late great Jim Jensen. Channel 2's weather experts, all three of them, Alan Casper, Joe Whitty, Irv Jakovsky, are here all at once. For all of it's 3 times as much weather than your normal one-time weather.
Right.
And they have Jakovsky here, they have Joe out there, and Alan's in front of the map, and it's amazing what they go through now when we have.
But nobody was doing that back then.
Snow.
But nobody was doing it back. That was a new thing that they did.
Right.
Back in the late 70s, they didn't do the kind of snow coverage.
Exactly.
It wasn't even because they weren't even
and
that.
Now,
they had gone 7 years since the Lindsay snowstorm.
Right. Now that you get even just a flurry, right? A flurry, and if I'm pushing the envelope here, may a bolt of lightning come down and strike me now. A snow flurry, maybe an inch in a few places, especially early in the season, and it leads off the news. And you see, we have team coverage of this event, starting with, and you got one reporter off of Route 64. You got the other one inside with the 20 tons of salt. You got this one and that one. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Weather drives the news. That is the way it is now, and the way it will always be.
Well, yeah, but there is a little bit of.
We were telling Joe and I and others, Craig Allen and some of the other people, we were telling the news people for years, weather drives the news. They never listened to us. But then after the blizzard of '78 or whatever like that, they suddenly came to, oh, you know what?
Weather drives
news.
Leave
off with this stuff, you know?
I think the blizzard of '96 really kind of cinched it all. with putting weather up front as opposed to leaving it behind. It had taken a gradual increase during the early 90s, but I think the blizzard of 96 kind of made it front and center because that was such a crippling snowstorm for from Washington up to Boston.
And it
Uh,
used to be, Joe, tell me if I'm wrong, it used to be that the weather was the last thing on the weather agenda on a typical newscast. You had like 20 minutes of news, 5 minutes of sports, the weather. They always wait until the very end of the bottom of the hour. And then they've moved it up ahead of sports. And now you've got weather sometimes in some cases leading off the news, even before they give you the news headlines. But first, let's go to the weather. And it's just amazing the transition you and I have seen over the last 30 or 40 years
mhm.
in terms of the importance of weather in the lives of so many people.
Well, they are their audience continues to dwindle, and our audience continues to increase. So we know where people are going, and very few, fewer and fewer people are sitting down watching newscasts, and they're going to alternative sources. And well, that's just the way the world is. That's the way the world has become, and the beauty of it, as I have told you, is the fact, and I've said this a number of times, we can do whatever we want here. Where else can somebody watching ask you to put up a map of something that's
Right.
relevant to your conversation, and you can instantly respond to that person? And like Jason
Right.
had asked for Jason Barry had asked for the
Or you
map of
get
the
a feed,
stratosphere, or
you get a feedback
the
link at the
snowfall map that I pulled up for Daniel asking me where the source is. I mean, this is the sort of live TV interacting with the audience at the same time is only going to get bigger, and everything else is only going to get smaller. The relevance of, in my opinion, the relevance of television news is going to continue to shrink. It's only the importance of it is probably going to be more in the minds of the people that are producing it, and not to the audience that they're producing it for. They're basically going to be producing the shows for themselves. They're putting together a product that makes them happy, that they think the audience wants to see, but
right,
in reality, it's not what they want to see.
right.
They want to see other things. They want to be involved in it, and in a big way, in a bigger way. So you know,
Where else could you find out on real television or standard television and get questions from the audience off the chat board here? And I just mentioned somebody who probably a lot of people remember in the back of their memories or whatever, Jim Jensen. Frank Riccio on the chat board says, my grandmother had a thing for Jim Jensen.
oh,
She
so
would
did my
never miss
mother.
a broadcast.
So did my
And
mother. I think she still does.
and somebody else further down on the chat board says if they wonder if we ever had any interaction with Jim Jensen. I didn't, although I was at CBS back in the 70s, and I know you were
I
too.
did. I interned there in 1979. I saw him in the studio a few times when I was working there. Uh, I, I might have said hello, or he might have said hello to me a couple of times, but I never really got involved in any kind of conversation um, with him. And I remember with seeing Rollin Smith there, Dave Marish. If you remember Dave Marish, he used to
Yes,
smoke a cigar while the show was going on, and you would see the
right,
smoke coming up in the back
right,
background. If you
right,
look close enough at the camera shot from your TV set, you could actually see it. Um,
right.
yeah,
But
so
everybody at CBS, I think you'll agree, everybody at CBS Channel 2 knew who the boss was of those newscasts because I remember on a couple of occasions being in the newsroom and on Jim Jensen's office door, the door was closed. I think it was on a weekend when especially I remember this. There was a huge, maybe like a 20 by 30-inch poster sized picture of Jim Jensen behind the anchor desk looking at, I think it may have come from a TV advertisement that he had blown up just to demonstrate that he was the man, he was the guy who ran that newsroom or was the captain, so to speak, of the CBS News at that time. And you're right, Rollin Smith and Dave Marish did the 11 o'clock show, and they were kind of like a memorable team at that time. They used to do their newscast from the newsroom. They used to do Jensen used to do it from the studio, and Marish and Rollin Smith used to do it from from the newsroom at that time.
Yeah, they did a lot of things that were innovative at that time. They're not innovative now. They've just been done hundreds of times. And somebody will come up and say, "Well, let's try something new. Let's do this." And
Right.
in reality, it's been done. It might have been done 10 years ago or 15 years ago. So what's new is old, and what's old is new. That's just kind of how it works. And
And it was,
frankly, my last few years, I just got bored with it anyhow. I
but
really
there was a
did.
banter, and there was a banter too among the newscasters. Like, is the one thing I notice these days, Joe, a weathercaster, whoever he or she may be, could come on the air and say, next Wednesday, next Tuesday, there's going to be a major storm. We're getting an idea right now from the long range maps that this is going to be a monstrous system. We're going to have to watch out for flooding. We're going to have to watch out for heavy rain, heavy winds, could be damage, could be power lines down. We're giving you the heads up now, 3 or 4 days in advance. But we just want to tell you about that. And I'll throw it back to you. And they throw it back to the person, whoever it is behind the desk, and they say, okay, thank you very much, Bob. On other news,
Yeah.
and it was never like that. If you said that with Jim Jensen behind the
Well,
desk,
he
or
paid
Ron,
attention to you.
they paid attention. They paid absolute attention. One time, Alan Casper, I remember, was talking about the fact that if the storm, that if the secondary storm did not form, uh, or if the secondary storm did form, it would cut off the massive amount of warm air advection, which would otherwise change a big snow over to rain. He said, if that storm doesn't happen, then the forecast for rain won't happen that I've just given you, and it'll be all snow, and I'll be in big trouble. And he threw it back to Dave Marish, and Dave Marish just gave a deadpan look and said, so what else is new?
By the way, uh, you and I didn't bring this up, but I just thought of, just came back to me. But one of the consequences of the coronavirus is the fact that snow days may be a thing of the past.
Right.
If people are doing online, if kids are doing online learning, well, and the teacher's not in, could do it from home, from their home. There's no reason to have a snow day anymore.
And you won't be hearing then on the radio for 5 or 10 minutes all of these schools that are being closed today, no classes today because of the snow. Well, if they're all going to be doing it from their home, you're absolutely right. Then there's no need to do that, right?
The
If,
the snow day may be history.
then the only thing they have to worry about during snow days is whether or not the wind blows hard enough to knock out the power lines and knock out the internet.
Well, that's a different, that's a different story. We have to rely
Right,
on the local power companies to figure that
right,
one out.
right.
But yeah, well, it's always good to reminisce about the past
You and
with
I ought
this
to
sort
get
of
together
stuff.
and write a book about all the stuff we went through in 40
Yeah,
years.
but Joe, it probably they'll wind up they'll if the book ever gets published, I'll probably have to be in fear of my life. There are a few people that I would probably not write. I'm going to say this. I really don't care because it's our show. But there are a few people along the way who I just I don't care for. Okay, so I'm
Bob.
not going to say who. I'm just
Are
saying
you
in
going to do your
general.
Bob Grant now? I
I
despise.
despise them. They're like 10 miles of bad road. Oh, look, I'm still people. It's a workplace, and you have to understand. Whether everybody seems to think you work TV, it's all jolly go lucky happy land, and it's not. There's a lot of like any other workplace. There's stuff that goes on, and there's politics, and there's um, a whole. It's the same. We're human beings. It's the same as any place else. And I will sit and praise. There are many people that I worked with over the years and the vast majority of them were wonderful to work with. I had wonderful times with so many people, but there are some that I wouldn't give the time of day to. Okay,
Exactly.
and don't deserve to get the time of day. Certainly not from me. So I will just that'll be something that I will. Well,
Each office,
you and I
Joe,
have had conversations, so you know where I am with all of this.
each office, I'm sure everybody who's watching your workplace, you've got at least one of those kind of people working in the same office. With me at News 12, my final like week or 10 days at News 12, it was like the last 10 minutes of the final episode of MASH. It was like saying goodbye to people, and people would come up to you, they'd hug you. People would come up to you, they give you a peck on the cheek. Oh, I'm gonna miss you. I'm gonna miss you. Oh, it's so sad. And you'd even get very emotional as well. One guy I worked with at News 12, one guy who was in management, I would pass him in the hallway at least once a day for a week or 10 days. Hi, and he'd just say hi right back, and we would pass each other. Nothing, nothing. I think he was so happy. He was actually happy to see me leave because we never did get along with each other. And there's somebody like that. I'm sure everybody works with somebody like that at their
Yeah,
workstation or workspace. There's always somebody in the crowd like that. And what are you going to say? What are you going to do? That's the way of life.
nothing. You just don't let it become. You just don't let it become something that eats away at you personally, because that can be really destructive to yourself, and you just don't let that happen.
Right.
And I was very good at I learned how to do that, and I just kind of ignored it and went my merry way, got my paycheck every week, and that's how I looked at it. And
Yep.
that otherwise you bring it home, to your family, you bring it home and it ruins your weekend, or it ruins your days off if you didn't have weekends off like I didn't. Um, but that wasn't gonna that I will say at least that for the most it was for the most part, it was not an issue. But like I said, Joe, if you and I sat down and wrote a book, I would have to I'd have to figure out a way to name names without necessarily naming
Naming
them.
names.
Right. So anyway, we've carried this over to 8:12 on a night where there's not very much going on. But if you are tuned in late, you can either watch the video on a replay on my YouTube channel, Joe Chaffee. Of course, don't forget you have Joe Rayo's YouTube channel, Joe Rayo Weather, where you can get his weather videos as well. But you can also listen to this show as a podcast, and it will be up in about 45 minutes to an hour. And you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Oh God, there's 8 places where you could find him, find them, and I actually found a couple of other places that I didn't know the podcasts were hanging out. So if you just search Joe and Joe Weather Show podcasts, you will be able to get them. And we not only put podcasts up on this show, but every day when I do Weather in 5, I put up a Weather in 5 podcast, and it's easier sometimes to just listen to the show than it is to watch it. So just bear that in mind. And that's it.
So now we're not on tomorrow night.
So
Tomorrow
yeah,
started.
Joe, there's not much going on. I mean, there are no tropical systems. It's quiet. What are we gonna do tomorrow night? Pretty much a repeat performance of tonight, and then go into a ranting session for 45 minutes. We could save that for Sunday. Let's take a couple of days off. We did 11 days straight, so we'll take tomorrow off. We'll take Saturday off, and we'll be back Sunday morning on at 11 o'clock at our usual Joe and Joe Sunday morning weather show.
And we will be here.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for putting up with us. It's fun. It's fun to share, for us to share our past adventures, and I hope you enjoy listening to what we have to say about life in the TV world.
It's nice taking the people backstage. It's almost like just before he made his historic speech in 1942, Winston Churchill, before he got before the microphone, turned around and belched.
Yes,
And you were there to see that.
exactly. All right. Good night, everybody. Take care. We'll see you on Sunday.